Have we just figured out the overarching story for Doctor Who Season 2? Yesterday evening, the BBC officially announced all 8 episode titles for the upcoming season of Doctor Who Season 2, which in a way is actually Doctor Who Season 15. I suppose if you're including the classic series, it's like Season 32? That was a complete guess, someone correct me in the comments. But point is, we've now got all these episode titles. Sorry that this video's coming to you a day late. I was out pretending to be a normal human and socialising. But today, I'm back, sat in this weird little cave place to discuss Doctor Who. There's so many theories that I've already heard people speculating on, and I want to go through each episode title by title to discuss what I think's going to happen in them, and who I think Mrs. Flood is and where the finale is headed. Last season we had Sutekh come back in the form of a big dog. Mrs. Flood, maybe she's a returning villain. We'll wait and talk about the finale when we get to it. Let's first look over here on the Doctor Who Twitter page, ready for an intergalactic exclusive, revealing the episode titles for Doctor Who Season 2. Now, it is worth noting as well, we don't yet know whether Disney have commissioned or picked it up, so there's no Christmas special or anything that's been shot yet. The current slate of Doctor Who is just these 8 episodes, and then the spin-off The War Between the Land and the Sea. Episode 1, The Robot Revolution, written by Russell T Davies and directed by Peter Hoare. This episode is going to be our companion introduction. Belinda Chandra will make her way onto the TARDIS, and from all the reports we've heard, she's an unwilling companion, which kind of reminds me of like Tegan Javanka from the classic series. It's something we haven't really explored in New Doctor Who, so that's pretty exciting. I mean, in all the teaser trailers, of which there were 2 new ones the other day, which let me know in the comments if you want me to cover them. There's probably other places out there that have already covered them. But point is, in all the trailers, Belinda is saying, "Get me home. I want to go home." But why does she get whisked away on all these adventures? Well, if we look at this little infographic thing here, it says at the bottom of that TV thing, also I've got to say I love the like retro theming and vibe they're going for this episode, especially the robots that we've seen in the trailer, like those big, almost like comic book 60s-esque designs. I think it's a really fun aesthetic to go with, but point is, at the bottom of that TV, it says Planet Belinda, okay? Planet Belinda? The planet is called Belinda, I guess. Now, there has been speculation that this is going to be a kind of recycled original Russell T Davies 1 plot that never actually got made. In Russell's book, The Writer's Tale, he discusses how he was going to make a Christmas special, I think with Dame Judi Dench, in which these robots come to Earth because they think she is like their alien queen or alien princess or something along those lines. So they take her back to their home planet and the Doctor has to go and rescue her. This would make so much sense. If the planet is literally called Belinda, and these robots come to Earth to find Belinda because they believe she is the princess of their home planet, there's also the possibility that she shares the same face with this missing princess. If the robots are looking for a princess, and we already know that Varada Sethu's character has her face in, like, the episode Boom, Mundy Flynn. She's also got her face as Belinda. Maybe, similar to Clara or something along those lines, her face is scattered throughout time. They even draw attention to this in one of the trailers where they're like, what's going wrong with her face? Well, I mean, that's not what they say. They're like, I've seen this face before, or something along those lines.
There is something already connecting us.
So I think this is going to be a pretty fun, self-contained story that sets up an overarching mystery where the Doctor has to go and save Belinda from this robot revolution. The title itself maybe implies to me, maybe it's like a commentary on AI. Obviously, Russell T Davies is writing this and he loves his political commentary. One of the biggest issues in TV and film, and I guess the world in general, is the usage of AI and AI taking over jobs. So maybe the revolution is humans revolting against their robot overlords. AI overlords. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let's move on to episode 2, which currently is, I think, the episode I'm most hyped for out of the entire season. Episode 2 is called Lux, and it's once again written by Russell T Davies and directed by Amanda Brocchi. This episode, I think, takes place in the 1930s, and I'm gonna guess the 30s. Last time, I think I said the 1950s or something, and someone in my comments left the most aggressive Look at the costumes. Look at the road. Are you a fool? This is clearly whatever time period, and I clearly didn't listen because I'm gonna guess the 30s. Maybe it's the 40s. But point is, this is a historical in America. It looks like there's a storm going on. It's got something to do with light. Let me Google the definition of lux. Lux. Yeah, it's a unit of illuminance equal to 1 lumen. I should have paid attention in science. Look, I know it had something to do with light, but the point is, this is probably, minor spoiler here, so skip ahead about 20 seconds if you don't want it, but this is going to be an episode that features a god. We have seen from filming photos that cinema over there, the letters get changed into Harbinger, which obviously, if you've watched the last season, that means a god's on their way. We've also seen the character played by Alan Cumming, that cartoon guy, Mr. Rinky Dink, I think is his name. It's something like that. But he's a cartoon that comes to life, and I'm guessing he comes out of the projector. It's all to do with light. He's the god of light or something. Maybe an unwilling god. Maybe he's an accidental harbinger. Something along those lines. But yeah, point is, just like last season, this is going to kind of be a Devil's Cord-esque dip into the past, like the not so distant past, and there's a god. I'm so excited. The aesthetic, the vibe of this episode, it just looks really, really cool. And we also know that Mrs. Flood is cropping up here. Okay, so we know from filming photos Mrs. Flood is in episode 1. We know Mrs. Flood is in episode 2. Are we doing a kind of Susan Triad-esque thing of Mrs. Flood is cropping up in all these periods of time throughout the series? Is she what's diverting the course of the TARDIS? As I mentioned, Belinda just wants to get back home, but she can't. Something's pulling the TARDIS away, which obviously we'll talk about in a minute, but leads us on to episode 4, which is a Dr. Light story, because I presume they can't get back to Earth in the correct time period. But yeah, is it Mrs. Flood who's doing it, or is Mrs. Flood just an observer? We'll get to that later on. Because episode 3 is titled The Well, once again written by Russell T Davies, although it's co-written by Sharma Angel Wallfall, and once again directed by Amanda Brocci. This episode we basically know nothing about. I think it's supposed to be really, really creepy, and I did actually see someone on Twitter, I can't remember where, and it could have just been absolute waffle, but I think someone said this is an episode to look out for because they met Russell T Davies, and Russell was like, oh, you don't want any spoilers for episode 3, which intrigues me. It makes me wonder, because we don't know about any villains of this episode, look at that vibe. Could it be something like Weeping Angels? Could it be like The Silence? Could it be a villain that's kind of horror-esque and creepy? Because you've got episode 1, your sort of standard companion introduction Doctor Who episode, then you've got your trip into the past, then episode 3 we're doing like a, I presume, future, because you've seen all those people in their futuristic armour. It would be really, really cool if it is some sort of creepy Weeping Angels or Silence type episode, maybe another villain. Let me know in the comments which villain you think would suit this aesthetic, because it looks like they're being sent down the well, whatever that may be, and then, yeah, they're going to get confronted with whatever evil may face them. Or maybe it's a plot thing. Maybe at the end of this episode, Mrs. Flood reveals her evil plan or something and stops the Doctor and Belinda getting home. But speaking of the Doctor and Belinda not being able to get home, that brings us to episode 4, titled Lucky Day, written by Pete McTighe and directed by Peter Hoare. Now we know that this episode, just like 73 Yards, is going to be the Dr. Light story. It follows Ruby and the unit crew as something evil happens. We know that Ruby meets the character who, I can't remember the guy, Conrad, I think, is his name. He's played by the guy who did the live-action Prince Eric in The Little Mermaid. But yeah, he's Ruby's date in this episode. We know they go on a date. We know there's Unit rocking up. We know Shirley Ann Bingham is back. We know Kate Stewart's back. Colonel Ibrahim's back. And it's also worth noting that this is written by Pete McTighe, who has written the spin-off, the Sea Devils spin-off, The War Between the Land and the Sea, which obviously is it's basically a Unit spin-off, so it does make sense that Pete is writing the Unit episode for this series, so there's like a nice narrative through line. But if we have a look at the little infographic thing, there's an article that reads, "Are Unit keeping aliens in their HQ jail?" Which, that's cool. Because obviously so many people have been asking, including myself, like, UNIT have just built this massive Stark-esque tower in the middle of London. Like, what's going on there? And we've seen in the trailer a shot that reminds me of, you know how in Torchwood they had that, like, underground bit with all the... I suppose there are cells that they put the weevils in, but there's, like, little containment units. I reckon it's going to be a similar thing for UNIT, and maybe here UNIT gets infiltrated and some of these aliens escape and then wreak havoc while Ruby's trying to have her date, or alternatively, this may be spoilers, this may be misinterpretation. If you don't really want spoilers, jump ahead 30 seconds. But there is the possibility from filming ages ago, there's these like creatures that jump over the wall during Ruby's date, like quite horror looking things we've seen in the trailer. But we've also seen filming pictures of a guy, like, removing the mask, and that guy removing the mask also plays another character in the episode. I don't know if I've explained that well, but point is, there may be a group of people trying to make, like, discredit UNIT. That they're making a fake alien invasion so that UNIT rock up and look like idiots. But that could just be misinterpreting of filming pictures. Either way, I think this episode's going to be an episode about misinformation. I mean, there's already a little article there that says global warming, that's on the aliens, so maybe it's some sort of commentary on, oh, blame others for all your problems. It's probably going to be a little bit political, and you know what? I'm here for it. Next episode is The Story and the Engine, written by Anua Ellams, directed by Michaela McPherson. This seems to be set in like a barber shop or something. They've put the barber emoji, then you've got little hair clippers and all that stuff. And as well, the spider there, I mean, it wasn't me who came up with it. I didn't know this character or myth or legend or whatever you'd call them existed, but Anisi is this god, like spider god, kind of God of Stories-esque, like they're a bit of a trickster. And it would make sense, once again, in keeping with the theme of gods. We've had episode 2 with a god, now episode 6, or 5, no, this is episode 5. Episode 5 has another god, which is Anisi. Now, this barbershop place, people have guessed, is on the back of the giant spider, who is probably Anisi, that we've seen in the trailer. There's missing people, maybe people are being sacrificed to this god, and the Doctor's gonna rock up and be like, no, stop your evilness. I hope that's exactly what he says. That's just the 15th Doctor's new speech. That would be great. But no, that's an intriguing episode. I think it's going to delve into like folklore and maybe urban legend or myth, which is pretty exciting. I think what this series seems to have, which is really nice, is a good tonal mix without being jarring. Like season 1, although I did enjoy it, it was kind of jarring to go Space Babies, Devil's Cord, Boom, 73 Yards, Dot and Bubble. Like they all felt so different. This feels like, I don't know, more of the Doctor Who that we know. Like, it does also feel kind of creepy. Like, it feels like they're dialing up the horror a bit. Lucky Day looks a bit creepy. Episode 5 looks a bit creepy. Episode 2 looks quite creepy. Episode 3 looks incredibly creepy. And in talking about all the creepiness, that brings us on to Episode 6, which does not look creepy at all. The Interstellar Song Contest, written by Juno Dawson and directed by Ben A. Williams. So this is the episode that, I mean, it was a rumour for so long, and then we've had it confirmed by the trailers, but the UK television presenter Rylan is going to be guest starring as himself in this episode. I read somewhere that he's playing himself. Like, he is Rylan, who has been cryogenically frozen and brought back for the Interstellar Song Contest, which is bizarre. But you know what? Juno Dawson, from what I've heard her Doctor Who Redacted series, and it was genuinely really, really good. So normally I'd be a little bit more apprehensive about this episode, but I can't lie, I'm kind of here for it. It debuts at the same time as Eurovision, like they're trying to tie it in with all of that. I think it'll just be quite fun. Like, it's going to be a bit silly, it's going to be quite fun, I'm here for it. And as well, the cat people are back, and I still don't think Doctor Who has ever managed to do, like, cat human people as good as they did in 2006. Like, the New Earth cat nuns looked brilliant. I don't know what was happening in Orphan 55, there was like some sort of bizarre furry thing, and I mean, this cat is based on a celebrity's look. I can't remember who, someone tell me in the comments, but the point is, this episode's probably going to be another self-contained fun. We know Mrs. Flood is there again, watching, She's just watching. Does the Doctor know Mrs. Flood is there in all these periods? Are they going to spot her? Does Varada Sithu's character have a link to Mrs. Flood? Well, we'll get to that in the finale. Wish World, written by Russell T Davies, directed by Alex Sanjeev Pillai. So, this is probably where Mrs. Flood's plans fully unfurl. She talked in The Empire of Death about, oh, I had such plans, and all of that jazz. We know she's up to something. But I think it may be a deliberate misdirect. Let's clear the air with the biggest theory running around the internet, which isn't impossible, but Sutek, the whole thing last season was, I got the wrong anagram, and she was a god, but he was a god, and Sutek, Susan Triad Tech, maybe a classic villain. I mean, I'm not suggesting this, I'm just getting this theory out the way, is the Rani. She, for those of you who don't know, is like a Time Lord scientist experimenter, kind of like Missy from the classic series. Like, she very much felt like a female version of the Master, but she was far more obsessed with like science experiments and stuff. Which, I can't lie, Mrs. Flood doesn't give those vibes at all, but also Russell is happy to mould and change characters. Like, Sutek was not always like a god, but he is now. And the reason people are saying this is because if we're going with the whole anagram thing, Flood, Rain, Rani, like, I could envisage a scene where Mrs. Flood is like, and what causes a flood, Doctor, while they're in the pouring rain? And he's like, oh, the rain, and she's like, rearrange those letters. Ooh, Rani, dun dun dun. But I don't know, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but I just think it would be a little bit silly. Obviously their execution's important, but I think it's a misdirect. Mrs. Flood is going to be like a guardian of good or something. I think the real evil force is somebody or something else, and Mrs. Flood is either some sort of god of stories, maybe tying in with the Anisi episode. She's been observing, she's been watching, she's been moulding. Maybe there's going to be a bit of meta commentary here about fandom. If she's been, I mean, I feel like we're straight back in the 60th anniversary where people were saying that's the reason the 14th Doctor had the same face as the 10th, but maybe she's like an audience. She is pushing the Doctor and Belinda on these adventures because she wants to sit back and watch, just like us, the audience. Or maybe she herself is some form of harbinger for the big bad of the season. Like, if she's been sent there in advance and she knows she's a harbinger and she's there watching and guiding events, ready to step up and fight the big bad alongside the Doctor at the end. I don't know, because I just think Mrs. Flood being a purely evil villain, like, what's the surprise? Do you know what I mean? Maybe I'm overestimating how deep this goes, but I just think there's got to be more to Mrs. Flood than just turns around, I'm evil. Do you know what I mean? I reckon maybe by the midpoint of the series we're going to be led to believe she's evil, but by the end she's actually going to be aiding our characters. Anyway, Wish World is bizarre. I mean, it looks quite cool, and it doesn't immediately imply anything old, recycled, or reused, which I'm really, really excited to see. This may be our first finale without a returning villain. Well, first finale of New Who, that is, or New Who. But there's this whole weird bone aesthetic and bone design everywhere. I reckon the Interstellar Song Contest episode is going to end with the Doctor and Belinda being taken to Wish World or something like that. And I mean, we might as well talk about the other finale episode, The Reality War, written by Russell T Davies and directed by Alex again. Now, the little infographic we have here is the borough of Hackney sort of being cracked and broken and split apart. So Reality War implies, I reckon, this is going to be big social commentary time. Russell's going to do some clever thing of, like, maybe tying in with the theming of episode 4, false narratives and people believing what they want to believe because it's easy rather than because it's the truth. And I think he's going to not just say it as literally as that, but he's going to do that as like a metaphor between realities being broken down. And we've seen all, like, the Doctor even wears one of those bowler hats and suits. and we've seen a load of people wearing similar things. Now, I haven't actually heard much about this finale. There's a couple of whisperings and some things which people out there's some people in particular that'll be like, oh, that's a fun little inclusion. You'll know what I'm talking about when it happens. No spoilers here, but it's gonna be funny. There is also an actual, like, leak about the finale, which I'm not gonna say here because I wish I didn't know it. And I'm training my brain to not remember it. It didn't happen. But yeah, that we may know a villain for this episode. Maybe. If, as well, going back to Mrs. Flood and villains a little bit, I wouldn't be surprised if Mrs. Flood is like the White Guardian, and then the Black Guardian is doing all the evil shenanigans. Maybe influencing one of the characters, maybe Ruby, to make a bad choice, just like the Black and White Guardians did in Classic Who with Turlo. Maybe because of the sprinkling of the salt, the Black and White Guardian had turned into, like, godlike figures, something along those lines. It would be so funny to have, like, Mrs. Flood battle it out with, like, another old woman. I mean, how many old women villains is Russell going to put in? We've had Susan Triad, we've had Mrs. Flood, we've had that woman with her twirly straw from Smith & Jones. I'm really here for it. They're always iconic. But I think whatever happens in this episode, or was originally meant to happen, there is the possibility, once again, if you don't want spoilers, this may not be spoilers, this is speculation, but skip ahead 30 seconds, because it's probably a big one, but there is the possibility of a regeneration in this episode for the 15th Doctor. If it is to be believed that Ncuti has actually moved on from Doctor Who because Disney aren't funding it currently and he doesn't want to be messed around in the schedules, which does make sense, it's a shame, but we could in only a couple of weeks be seeing a regeneration, which is mad. But there's no confirmation of that. I do think, though, something bad's gonna happen. Maybe Ruby's gonna die. Something, do you know what I mean? It's the season 2 finale. Something big has got to hit us. But I'm excited. Let me know your theories and thoughts in the comments section down below. Do you think Mrs. Flood is the god of stories? Do you think she's the Black or White Guardian? Or I think the Black Guardian's now called the Guardian of Chaos, something like that. I saw it on a piece of Doctor Who merch. Has that always been their name, or is that just a recent addition? Either way, thank you very much for watching this video. If you did enjoy, as ever, please do remember to like, comment, subscribe. You can check me out on Patreon. You can check out our Doctor Who fan films. The final one is coming to you, hopefully soon after this season of Doctor Who. There's already 3 feature-length parts of our Doctor Who fan series out there online. There's a clips channel full of little clips if you just want to dive in and see a confrontation with the Dalek Emperor, or with the last Cyberman, or with the Sontarans. That's all entirely up to you. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye!
Don't forget to click below and subscribe to the official Confused Adipose YouTube channel.
I will destroy you!
She's not seen a single episode.
No, I've watched your episodes.
Keep these sonic screwdrivers.
What else am I saying about the film? Don't watch this one.